Welcome. It's episode 158 of Grow Yourself Up. And today I'm really delighted to be joined by Dr. Arielle Schwartz. And I'm going to tell you a bit about her first, and then I'm going to tell you all about what we discussed. This is a really beautiful and wide-ranging episode with so much richness around generational trauma and many, many things. So let me just tell you first about Arielle. Then we're going to read you her bio. So Dr. Arielle Schwartz is a clinical psychologist and leading voice in the healing of trauma. She's an internationally sought-out teacher and author of 7 books, including the Complex PTSD Workbook, the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook, EMDR Therapy and Somatic Psychology, and Applied Polyvagal Theory and Yoga. As the founder of the Center for Resilience-Informed Therapy, she offers a mind-body approach to therapy for trauma and informational mental health and wellness updates through her writing, public speaking, social media presence, and blog. She believes that the journey of trauma recovery is an awakening of the spiritual heart. Learn more at her website, which is www.arielleschwartz.com. Okay. And actually, her first book, I think it's her first book, but I came into contact first with Dr. Schwartz through the EMDR and somatic psychology book, I think maybe like 8 or 9 years ago when I bought the book. And then I was supposed to do a training with her in 2020 in June, and that was going to be in person in London. It was a 4-day training, and unfortunately, that had to go online, which was really disappointing. But that was what was going on in the world at that time. And then a couple of years ago, I was really lucky to go on a polyvagal yoga kind of teaching thing with her. So that's what she references at the beginning of this episode. And I really love Dr. Schwartz's work on complex trauma and how human she makes everything. She's got very beautiful books, very, very useful for both practitioners and non-practitioners. And this episode is very generous. There's very generous storytelling where Arielle shares about her mother, her mother's mother, what happened to her great-grandmother. And some of that is very rich, and it's very beautiful to listen to because we get to see how things play out across generations and then how much opportunities there is for healing. And I'm really, really touched by the generosity in this because it's hard to be honest about a lot of these things. And so I'm profoundly grateful for what she shares here. There were also parts of this where I felt like I was listening to my own story, particularly around the children. And we talk a bit about how when we ourselves have had complex trauma, some of the patterns that we may see on our children and like what arises in their nervous systems. So we talk about the mother wound, we talk about generational healing, we talk about Arielle's path to motherhood and some of the really mixed feelings she had, or the ambivalence she had, how she dealt with anger. And there's so much about repair woven through this episode, which is really wonderful. We talk about primitive reflexes a bit. We did like a big tour of a whole lot of things. So I hope that you will find this really rich and really useful. And to kind of, there's also so much hope woven through this, that there's always hope for repair and we can always shift and change things. So I hope you can take that from this episode and sending love out into the world to all of you. So I'm really, really, really excited to be here today with Dr. Arielle Schwartz. Thank you so much for joining me here today. It's a great honor, like a real honor.
Thank you, Cath. It's good to be with you again. And I really loved connecting before we started in here about how we met in the first place and that we got to be in person, which is pretty special when I came to the UK a year ago.
Yeah, it is such an honor. Really exciting. So tell us a bit about your path to motherhood.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of different paths that probably all come together in that journey. Certainly, my own experience as a child and being raised by my mother. And we can also even look at the generations that even came before my parents that then shaped. And I probably could, we could spend years talking about the path to motherhood if we broaden the lens. But I actually thought I would share one very specific story, and it's going to tie a few of those threads in together.
Wonderful.
But my husband and I had gotten married in 2001, in May of 2001. And this will be a little bit more relevant, although it was such a world event, but it'll be maybe a little more relevant for those of us in the US. But in September of 2001, we had our 9/11.
Yeah.
And it was such a very significant kind of collective trauma event. And my brother-in-law was in the military in the special operations. And so after 9/11, he and his whole group of soldiers were all deployed in a bunch of missions that were all focused on fighting Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
In February of 2002, he was killed.
I'm
And
so sorry.
oh, thank you. Thank you. And it was sudden and abrupt and unexpected and shocking and all of the things that accompany an event like that, and a phone call in the middle of the night and so on.
Oh, what a tragedy as well.
So much so, and certainly for my husband and his, my husband's mother, my mother-in-law, who, just lost her son. And it was complex because they didn't know for sure if he had died. And so it took some time for us to really all be clear on exactly what had happened. And just prior to that, my husband and I were talking about, let's start a family, right? We've been married at this point for about 8-9 months, and let's start our family. And then with Kurt's death, we looked at each other, we're like, we're going to wait. Like, let's push the pause button. Let's grieve first, and then we'll revisit this, the starting of our family. And I don't know how life works, but my daughter had a different idea. And so a few months later, I was pregnant. And beautiful, exciting, wanted, but a surprise. Like, oh, wow, okay, she came through of her own volition. This is her timing. And there's also something divine in this story because Kurt died on February 22nd of 2002 at 2:03 in the morning. And all these numbers are kind of relevant because my daughter, when we found out we were pregnant, her birthday was going to be the 1-year anniversary.
Oh
And
my word.
right?
Wow.
And the whole process really threw me into this tailspin where, like, my mind struggled with holding grief and joy at the same time. And also my body really went into its own tailspin. And so I was profoundly sick with morning sickness that didn't end at the end of the first trimester, but went on for 8 months. And so I know, right? So I just threw up every day for the majority of this pregnancy and struggled with keeping on weight. And I had lost 20 pounds in the first trimester and all, fast forward, like big picture for everybody's nervous system. My daughter's fine. She's healthy. She's 22, all is well. But the kind of origin story or my path to motherhood was filled with so much conflict and so much ambivalence.
Yeah.
Again, ambivalence is such an important word. In fact, I remember years later coming across an article by Winnicott, a good Brit, right? And and basically, like, his writings about why ordinary mothers feel ambivalent towards our children, or even sometimes resent our children. And I was just filled with all of that. Like, even before she came into the world, I was resentful that I was throwing up every day. I was resentful that the timing just felt too much too fast. And then in the pregnancy, my mother gets diagnosed with cancer.
Oh my God.
Right? Like the stuff that you kind of can't make up. And I love my mother very, very much. She and I are very close. And I spent a good amount of my time and energy growing up being the mother for my mother. because
Okay.
my mother was not wanted by her mother. She was rejected. Her mother told her she tried to end the pregnancy, obviously unsuccessfully. My mother was born, and at the time in 1941, this is why I said it's going to be multiple threads in here, but the time that my mother was born in 1941, her mother was 49. And that
Oh,
was pretty
wow.
unheard of at the
Yeah,
time,
that's
right?
really unheard of. And also in 1941, which country was she born in?
So she was born here in the US,
Okay.
and my grandmother grew up in Manchester, England. So if you want to kind of locate a little bit
Okay.
of that.
Okay, so they weren't trying to escape anyway.
Well, prior, my great grandmother was the one that escaped. So
Okay.
my family was from Russia, or Kyiv, which is now Ukraine. It's all a very complex story there too. But basically, when my great grandmother was pregnant with my grandmother was when she escaped. And
Wow.
that's when they left for England. So that flight energy, that generational trauma, certainly was in my grandmother's body, certainly transmitted to my mother's body in terms of her rejection of my mother. And my mother was given away for the first 5 years of her life, and then was given back to my grandmother to be raised by a mother that really struggled with any form. They never formed a bond. Ugh.
Wow.
Yeah, just like we'll take a breath with all of that, right?
So much. I mean,
Yeah,
like I love what you said about the flight energy, but so much mother wound passing down the generations and not being able to be there for the baby and needing the baby to be there for them, the mother. Wow.
that's right. And what came through for me in that pregnancy, especially with my mother's cancer diagnosis, right in that time frame, was that I had to tell my mother, which was very challenging, Mom, I need to preserve my mothering energy for this child that I'm bringing into the world.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I mean, can I really honor you for saying that? Because I think that when we have always tended to our mother, postpartum is often the first time when we realize I've cared up the generations, now I've got to care down, and there's this massive energetic vacuum about who's caring for us ever. And so, how beautiful that you could really notice that even in pregnancy, and to kind of have a boundary around, like, I can't mother you through your cancer, basically.
Yes. It was so hard. I'm an only child. So on top of that, there was all of this guilt and is it really okay? And all of that. And it didn't mean that I wasn't going to care and
No,
be
of course.
caring through that process.
Yeah.
It almost was like an energetic shift that needed to happen that
Yeah.
then actually freed me up to be so much more caring because it wasn't coming out of resentment or obligation.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's very beautiful. I mean, that's so much bravery and so much beauty and so much kind of, so much in all of that. Thank you for sharing
So
that.
much. And so much complexity and all of that. And so, if I, kind of complete a few other threads of that story, one was that I really wasn't aware of what I call the shadows of the generational trauma around my mother's rejection by her mother until that pregnancy. And as I sat with the pregnancy and the dynamics that I had to kind of clear to make the space to do a different path with my daughter, that was when I described it as like becoming aware of these shadows of what I literally felt like I had absorbed in the womb with my mother.
Yes.
And that incomplete, and like, mind you, like, I admire her so much because she did do years and years of her own therapy. She herself is a psychologist.
Really?
And yeah.
How
And so,
amazing.
like, we've been able, and this is partially like why I could say that to her, is that she and I over the years have been able to have these conversations. Right? Like,
That's
I take
incredible.
courses in nervous system regulation and generational trauma. My mother, who's 84 now, attends all of my courses. So we literally have these
Wow.
conversations on a regular basis.
That's magical. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so beautiful to hear the opportunities for repair. I
Mhm.
find that very touching.
And there's a way in which, like, when I think about my mother's role as being what we would even call a cycle breaker for me, even though I had still some more work to do for
Yeah.
our lineage, but it speaks to the power that of healing, that when one person is willing to do that, that it clears these paths and it opens
Yes.
up the channel. And, I feel so deeply confident that my daughter, who's now 22, is really able to engage in these deeply meaningful conversations with me
Yeah.
in a way that I also get to have with my mother. And so there's an increasing robustness of healing and health that comes through.
Yeah. Like what amazing magical work you've done for your female lineage. It's just like incredible. And that everyone is still alive to do that. I'm very touched to hear about your mum still being alive and being willing,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you. So as I'll share one more piece here, which is that when my daughters when I went into labor with her, I went into labor on the 1-year anniversary of February 22nd of 2003. And when, but I went into labor late in the day. And so she was born at 3 in the morning on February 23rd. So I shared the numbers. My brother-in-law was
He was
2.
died at 2:03 a.m., I
He
thought.
died, yeah, at 2:22 at 2:03, and she was born on, 3 3:02 and 2:23 at 3:02 in the morning in 2003. So, like, all of this, again, I don't know about numerology, that's not my shtick, but, like, it was magical, and there was this feeling for me of not only was it a year later, it was a new year, but it was a new day. Like she came
Yeah.
in just the next day.
Yeah.
And there was something important about turning that page.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It was like, yeah, I love because sometimes if it's too close together, it feels like one soul's replacing another soul, but this is clearly a new soul.
Yeah.
Wow. That's just such a beautiful story. And how was early postpartum? Like, how was motherhood? When you said you'd cleared a lot of stuff and you'd noticed the shadows, did you do that energetically? Were you already working somatically? How did that kind of?
I I feel like what came through for me, I mean, I'd already been working somatically for years because I trained in somatics starting in 1996. And so for me, and I was a yoga teacher since 1996, and I taught yoga through my whole pregnancy with her. I taught postpartum yoga. It was super enjoyable to teach postpartum yoga while I was pregnant with both of my kids. So I feel like the body piece, as sick as I was, and all of that was something that I really, really had, for lack of a better term, an opportunity to work with. Like there was so much, and it was so hard to relate to my body during pregnancy, and it was so hard to relate to my body postpartum. I had, with my daughter, a tremendous amount of postpartum anxiety, out the roof, just insomnia that worsened with the anxiety. And then the less I slept, the worse the anxiety got. And it just became this very vicious cycle. And, we did have some support, but we don't live near our families, my husband and I. And so we I feel like we kind of did the best that we could as a unit raising a young child, and we brought in more and more help because we ultimately needed that.
Yeah.
And I feel like as much as I had a lot of support, I needed all of that support because everything that was kind of coming through the gates of new motherhood, it was, so much to process.
Yeah.
And I wish that I had some additional tools then that I have now. Like now I'm a daily meditator, and like I have some additional ways of being with all the process, and I just didn't have that back then. And I forgive myself. I mean, I don't necessarily think I should have had more than I had. I guess ultimately I think it was exactly what it was, but I struggled with that postpartum phase with her. And I think that, probably went on for a few years to be honest. And then I had my son. So, I was pregnant for 2 years, then I get pregnant again. And so my son was born when my daughter was 2 years and 4 months. So it was kind of like, just being in the transformational fire for those early many, many
For many
years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But thankfully, and this was really a turning point, when I was pregnant with my son, I started working with a different body psychotherapist. So I had worked with one therapist. She was lovely when I was pregnant with my daughter, but the second body psychotherapist really helped me a lot. And I think I got in touch in that phase of work with where my system was still carrying a certain quality of shock. And that shock in itself led me to be, if I were to show with my hands, kind of stuck out here, like stuck
Yeah.
in this kind of expansion and like kind of deer in the headlights. Like it was my own Moreau reflex that I was stuck in. I was like in startle.
Yes.
And I didn't even know that I had a part of me that was kind of stuck in startle.
Yeah.
And
how did that manifest, can I ask? Because I think that I've also been stuck in startle. And for me, that means like more doing. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do like what did it look like for you?
I think that the way that startle would show up for me was that I was very quick to anger. I was really irritable. I felt such a strong need to be in control because the cost of losing control was feeling like I was just going to yell at my kids once I had two of them. And so it was like going between like two bound and then having this, this strong reactivity in me to that which fell out of my control.
Yes.
And so as I worked on integrating that part of me that was stuck in the shock waves, and whether that shock waves was all the way back to my great-grandmother having to flee her homeland and flee her mother, whether that shock wave was the imprint of my grandmother trying to end the pregnancy with my mother or giving her away, whether that shock wave was the death of my brother-in-law, whether it's some combination of all of those shock waves, 9/11 as a collective shock wave.
Yeah, your birth even.
Right. Like all of these layers of where my body knew that and would almost default to that as in the midst of a stressor, that's where I would go. And so like, I'm just softening my face as I talk about it because it is such like I can feel the flavor of it. I don't feel that I'm stuck there anymore. And I'm so grateful to not be stuck there. But I have so much compassion for the part of me that was stuck there for a long time.
Yeah, and I think that's really beautiful the way you've expressed that because I was also very reactive in early motherhood and control. I had worked so much on control and perfectionism, on releasing control and trying to release perfectionism. But in early motherhood, those two nearly finished me off, trying to perfect things and trying to control just motherhood and too many twins. And it was completely out of control. And that energy of like, I felt like I was an open flower all the time, but somehow stuck in freeze as well, kind of just like desperately trying to control. And I think that so much actually of what we see, perhaps turning up in our therapy rooms, is a retained motor and attained FPR.
Yeah.
And how tending to that makes such an incredible difference. I mean, I'm actually doing some of my own reflex integration work at the moment, and it is bringing up so many early things, so much terror actually, and so much kind of, so much survival energy is coming up, which is really sometimes hard to live through actually.
It's so true. And just for anyone listening that's like, what's an FPR, right? Like, so if we look at the startle or the Moreau reflex and it's out here, it's like, whoa, what, like I get really big and expanded with my energy. The fear paralysis or FPR, fear paralysis reflex is being basically stuck in contraction. It's its opposite.
Yeah.
And drawing everything inward. I sometimes describe it as like, we can see cats do it sometimes, like if they're laying on their back and they're like, "Ooh," and then they go like this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or like, or all of a sudden you just become caught like the tortoise in its shell, right? It's like, oh, like then it becomes hard to ultimately feel like we can free ourselves to be more in control of our own energetic domain, that actually I can bring my attention back to the world and I can go in and rest, and I'm not stuck at either extreme.
Yeah. And I loved about when I did that polyvagal yoga with you, um, that you talk a lot about this, about, I don't know if you said this, but you talk about expansion and contraction. And I always think that I spend my whole life trying to be like a blooming flower all the time. And I didn't go more into being a closed flower like this. And now I'm much more conscious with my nervous system of like not being that frantic state. I mean, consciously, apart from the reflex work, and having just time to like sit on my heat pad and
Mm.
purposely shut down a bit, you know what I mean? To kind of do some of that
Exactly.
repatterning.
Exactly, right? Like, that's where, for me at this stage, being a daily meditator, like, I literally will schedule in time into my day where I downregulate into deep rest. And then, I come back out and I'm like, okay, I did a little bit of deep rest. So my system doesn't have to do it for me, like forced rest.
Yes, exactly. Like bring
Yeah.
some big sickness or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and tell us, there's so many places I want to go. So I'm trying to think, where should I kind of go? Tell us, you're an expert in complex trauma. You've written some wonderful books, some lovely, like quite simple books about complex trauma. And then I've also got your treatment manual. Tell us about what made you specialize in complex trauma. I think personally there's a lot more complex trauma than we might acknowledge, because I said to you earlier, so many of us hide in plain sight looking like super successful um, externally, but then kind of collapsed into our child state on the inside. Tell us about complex trauma. Tell us how you relate that to yourself, wherever you want to go with that.
Absolutely. So, I think I might even like tie it a little bit more into this whole timeline of parenthood, right?
Oh,
Because
please. Yeah.
my son comes into the world, and so now we're kind of fast forwarded to about 2005 is when he was born. I'm now a parent of two kids. I am learning continually about myself. I'm working with this beautiful body psychotherapist, and I'm integrating my own reflexes and my own sense of self. And both of my children, now my daughter is about 2.5, my son's a newborn, and at this stage, my 2.5-year-old daughter has a speech delay. And the good news about this story is that we go and we have her evaluated for speech therapy. Her speech therapist turns to me and she says, "I believe that your daughter has sensory processing challenges. I'd like you to go see our OT and do an evaluation for that." She was like off the charts for sensory processing and sensory integration challenges. Good news is that we landed in the office of this magnificent occupational therapist who specializes in sensory processing, reflex integration, like all of the things that I actually was learning also now about myself.
Yeah.
And so it kind of launches everything into this new direction where she's getting treatment for reflex integration and sensory processing, and I'm observing her and seeing myself in her little body,
Yeah.
and it becomes this kind of mutual unfolding and evolution, which calms her nervous system, calms my nervous system. I'm now parenting my son. By the time he was 2, we caught it right away. And so he starts
Yeah.
the occupational therapy, and we're doing all of this early work for his nervous system as well. And it introduced us to the early listening protocols. It's now evolved into Unite and Safe and Sound protocol and Rest and Restore protocols. But at the time, it was called integrative listening systems. And
Yeah.
basically, we all of us went through this listening protocol for nervous system regulation. Again, life-changing, like so
Yeah.
profound to start to integrate across all of our nervous systems. And as this is happening for me, it's also helping me turn towards the unresolved parts of my childhood. So I'm starting to get increasingly clear that, like, and I've been in therapy for years, and some of this was already known to me, but like the impact of my parents' divorce, the impact of the conflictual divorce that happened all around when I was 2 years old, the
Wow.
experience of going and living across two households and how that shaped my nervous system
Yeah.
and where I felt safe and where I didn't feel safe. And so all of this is kind of helping me see myself more and more clearly. Fast forward another 8 years or so, and I'm writing a blog. So now we'll go into like 2012, 2013, and I start to write about what it's like to raise children with sensory processing challenges. What's it like to raise the highly sensitive child? What is it like to understand my own trauma as a parent? So I'm writing about this as I'm going through the parenting journey, kind of similar to you with your work here. Like I felt so motivated to deeply understand, and also like, hey, if my understanding can help somebody else, like
Yeah.
let me put this out there. And so I wrote a blog on complex PTSD and dissociation, largely motivated to better understand myself, right? And to have some words to articulate what I was learning about myself. And this blog really took traction. It really it got a lot of viewership. It landed in spaces and places beyond my wildest imagination. At the same time, I also wrote a blog about polyvagal theory. That blog went my version of viral. Like it was
Wow.
getting 1,000 hits a day, 3,000 hits a day, 10,000 hits a day. Like it was getting widely
That's
read. And I was
huge.
like, it was huge, right? For like, it was
Yeah.
again, like 2013, 2014, and I'm
There's
writing
not
this
even
blog.
social media then, I don't think. Well, maybe
No,
there was, but
well, early social media. I would put it on LinkedIn and I put it on Facebook. There wasn't Instagram yet. And so I would put these blogs out there, and on a particular day and particular like really clear moment, I got this clarity of like, this is a book. And I started to take all the writings that I had put together and start to organize them into the outline of a book. And literally, as I'm doing this, I receive an email from a publisher that says, hey, we came across your book on complex PTSD and dissociation. And we came across your blog that you wrote about this. Would you like to partner with us and write a book on this topic? So that opened up that possibility of really reaching a larger audience on that first book, the Complex PTSD Workbook.
wow, I haven't, like, I'm sure I've got that one, but I didn't know you wrote about parenting.
It's not about parenting. It was very much about looking at complex PTSD and dissociation through the lens of how do we heal and how do we help people recognize it in themselves and heal. But it got motivated for
Right.
me through
Yeah.
that whole
Right.
journey. Right. I have not written a parenting book. That may be
I was
down
like,
the road.
have I missed this book? Have I missed
No,
it?
no. It's the first book, but it was so intertwined with that journey. I think that again, I've never really spoken about that before, but like that really
Yeah.
was a huge piece that came out of those early experiences of like, not only did can we learn and heal ourselves, but in that process, doesn't that also change how we can show up for our children?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that what I always say to clients, and it's difficult to kind of sometimes get this point straight away, but the nervous system shifts that we do, they pick up, in the ether. It's, we don't go home and tell them, now you're going to feel differently or something. The way we respond, or if we stop going into freeze so much and we have a bit more capacity to be there with them, or we don't go into rage and I have a bit more capacity to be there with whatever's coming up and everything, that shifts. I can see my children's bodies going into more ease as I get more capacity and as I get more
100%.
like rage, because I can go from the extremes and now I'm kind of coloring in the middle. You know what I mean? So they have the full range of expansion.
Exactly. That's such a beautiful image right there, right? I can actually find the connection between the two extremes, and I can color that in now, and I can make this full, more robust sense of self in that whole range of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you touched on about the sensory processing is just so vital, because I don't think that there's, I mean, it sounds like you've got a fantastic OT in this country, so in the UK. Not a lot of OTs are trained in reflex integration. There's a lot of other practitioners who do it. So there's neurodevelopmental therapists, there's chiropractors who do it sometimes osteopaths, sometimes OTs, but in a kind of, and there's something called rhythmic movement. But I've always found that the attachment piece is very important with the reflex integration somehow. And that, and I wish that, and also even sensory integration is not covered that much in OT trainings in this country.
It's true here as well. I think that, we were very lucky to be referred, first of all, the fact that our speech therapist even picked up on it.
Yeah.
But this is also Boulder. It's a hub for all of this. So we live in a very special place here in the US. But I would say even in the US, the majority of OTs do not get training in sensory processing. It is a specialization, and reflex integration is an extra specialization as well. So I don't know that it's always built in. And like you said, sometimes you need to go the osteopathic route, or we have to be creative about finding people that are skilled in understanding this. And you brought in attachment, and that's really powerful too. I've got like two associations to it. One is that when you work with the listening protocols, which again have become like increasingly available with the Safe and Sound protocol and Unite and training people literally around the world. And what we've learned about that is that when we're opening up, so if you don't know what Safe and Sound protocol is, for anyone listening, it is a sound-based protocol for the vagus nerve.
Yeah.
And it basically is sending in passive cues of safety into the ear that allow the ear to literally open up and receive the cues of social connection.
Yeah.
And as a result, to kind of downregulate out of defensive states of fight or flight into a relaxed capacity, an open capacity for connectivity and relationship and attachment.
Yeah.
But what tends to happen, and adults can do this as well as children, but what tends to happen is that when we open up the vagus nerve and we soften out of defensiveness and we become more available for a relationship, what comes through the gates is relational trauma, betrayal trauma, deep vulnerability. Like, if I open myself up, will I get hurt again? Attachment trauma that is unresolved kind of comes to the surface, hopefully now to be held and witnessed and deeply integrated into our overall sense of self. But it can be very, very vulnerable at first.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you mentioned that, because we were doing the SSP with my daughters, and actually it's been a bit too potent at the moment. So we stopped, particularly one of them, because of, I think there was kind of too much coming up, and it was too, I think the way it actually worked on her ears as well was a bit much. I find it really fascinating though how potent it is. I actually want to do it for myself. I have actually trained it, but anyway, I won't go to that now. But I think that I at some point thought, oh my word, this is magical. I'm just going to sit them with headphones. And I mean, we did it as an attachment piece. So actually all four of us would try and do it together, just with twins and my husband and I. But that was too intense. And then we tried to do it with them separately. And then it was just really quite hard. So I'm amazed that you managed to do that all kind of so smoothly.
Well, we did the focus program. So remember, like, going back to the program that we did with our kids, it was before SSP was developed. And so the focus program is sometimes it's the other program that Unite has now that was originally it was the original ILS program. And that program isn't as downregulating. Okay. You actually stand up and move and do balancing exercises, and you throw a ball back and forth. It actually has some upregulation to it. And it was more, I think it's a little more tolerable at first as we're making way towards that deep restful opening, which, as you said, can be too much too fast. I mean, I've certainly seen with some people that they can do 30 seconds of a song and they need to integrate that because it's a lot for the nervous system to receive and digest.
Yeah. And I really had to notice my own perfectionism in that because the sessions, some of them were 30 minutes. And then I calculated, right, we can do 30 minutes a day. We'll be done by this section. And then we can get into the next part of it. And we couldn't do that, So then we went down to 15 minutes. And then sometimes that was too much. And I had to really notice how my own shame got touched about, well, why come we can't do this? What's wrong with us? And just put it aside for the moment. And I'm just conscious of the time. I really want to make sure I ask my questions.
We can go down so many rabbit holes with each other. I'm enjoying it.
Tell us, me too. Tell us, so you are like an expert in polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, and you teach a lot of yoga to support vagus nerve, and you do special vagal toning. Tell us why, please explain for the listeners, why is it that when we have complex trauma, that we have poor vagal tone? And do you think it relates to some parenting practices? Because I often, I didn't breastfeed my children like this because I couldn't breastfeed. And I often think that some modern stuff might inadvertently mean that we don't weave body integration and indeed reflexes in the way that we might have previously done. And I kind of hesitate even to go there because it can lead to so much kind of blame, self-blame or something. But tell us about vagal tone, about why toning our vagus nerve is so important.
Beautiful. There's quite a few questions in there. I'm going to kind of break them down in a few ways. First of all, what is vagal tone? Vagal tone is an ability for our nervous system to move between the two primary branches of the autonomic nervous system, which is the ability to move between sympathetic mobilization and parasympathetic rest. Now, we've been talking about a core rhythm of that as we spoke about the coming out with the Moreau reflex and the coming back in with the fear paralysis. But when we're looking at an integrated nervous system, it's this ability to feel joyful and alert and to move through the world, and also to come into rest and digest and to sleep well at night and to be able to just soften and be close with another person. And those would be kind of the two primary nervous system states. And why our vagus nerve is central to that is because the vagus nerve travels into the heart and it works very closely with your heart's pacemaker, so that your basically a high vagal tone, it builds something that we call high vagal efficiency, or it's the ability for the vagus nerve to basically be more active and less active on regulating the heartbeat. So sometimes if the vagus nerve is too I like to use the metaphor like driving a car, right? Think of your sympathetic nervous system like the gas pedal and your vagus nerve like the brakes. If the brake is always stuck on, if the vagus nerve is always stuck on, we're not going to get the elevation of the heart rate that we need to climb a mountain or go to a dance class or feel joyful and playful.
Yeah.
If the vagus nerve is always stuck off, we are going to be always in go, go, go mode. It's hard for us to stop and rest. We feel restless, irritable, more prone to anger, more anxious, all of that. If the vagus nerve, going back to the stuck on position, we're going to feel more depressed and shut down and hopeless and withdrawn.
Yeah.
And so vagal tone is this ability for the vagus nerve to help us have a very flexible nervous system. And we can measure it through things like heart rate variability and blah, blah, blah. But why is lower vagal tone, why is lower vagal tone linked to complex PTSD? When we look at complex PTSD, we'll see that we're more likely to be stuck in inefficient nervous system states. We're going to have times in which we're stuck in more panic, overwhelm, anxiety, irritability, that high intensity. Conversely, there might be times when we're stuck more in shame and shutdown and powerlessness and despair. And it impacts our mindset and it impacts our emotions, and all of that is intertwined.
Yeah.
So then the third part of your question, if I'm tracking it all, is
Yeah, you're doing brilliant tracking.
thank you, is how do we treat complex PTSD, and why is the vagus nerve such a key to that process? So if ultimately we want to feel more balanced, more at ease in ourselves, more capable of meeting the demands of the world, but not being stuck in go, 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 right? We want to bring back more of that vagal flexibility or vagal agility, nervous system agility. And so the vagus nerve becomes a kind of direct nerve pathway that we actually get to work with to interact with our autonomic nervous system. And the vagus nerve is our 10th cranial nerve. It's called vagus because it's considered to be the wandering nerve, and it has extensive nerve endings that go around our face, into our heart, into our stomach, into our digestive organs. And so when we breathe rhythmically, we're toning the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
When we self-massage areas of the face or neck where the vagus nerve is close to the surface, we are toning the vagus nerve to do this optimal job, basically applying and removing that brake.
Mm.
How'd I do?
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And when you said the less efficient nervous system states, I always say we're living in our survival states.
Totally.
So flipping between, I think I mostly just flipped between sympathetic and dorsal, or used a lot of sympathetic to keep myself out of dorsal, because maybe that was actually, that Deb Dana term, my home from home. Anyway,
Yeah.
But I think that's a lot of us. And indeed, that thing of being always on and always like frantic is so celebrated.
Yes. Yes. It's highly functional, right? And we get rewarded for being on the go and being able to shuffle our kids from soccer practice to art class to their theater performance, especially when you've got twins. I can't even imagine. I mean, I had 2 years apart. I mean, it was just constant. It was, okay, you've got theater, but you need to be at your bike practice and, like all of the different things.
Yeah.
And it is kind of nonstop. So it also reinforces that, that state. And then you get home at the end of the day and it's either collapse or all of the built up anger, at least for me, of I got put last throughout that whole process. And what about me? Right?
Yeah. So I think that's such a good point, because when we have, going back to our kind of coping strategies, which are supported by our nervous system patterning, where we are just go, go, go. And so then we look all shiny. Then we get to motherhood and we want to still go, go, go. And our baby frustrates our ability to go, go, go in a way and to kind of make things look good. And then at some point we might go into collapse because we literally have the wind completely knocked out of our sails. And then it's even more frustrating because that go, go, go is functional and it facilitates keeping the shadow nicely away. And then when you self-identify as being very competent and being able to, I just need to work harder and then I'll be able to sort this out. And in this case, actually, the working harder contributes to more unwellness and dysregulation. And that kind of that piece around really learning to meet our needs is so important. But when we've been like neglected, like what you talked about, having to mother your mother from when you were tiny, we kind of have to come back into contact with actually ourselves. Do you know what I mean? As if, because I love in the what's the neglect literature, which talks about how it's acts of omission. What happens in neglect, and then we tend to omit ourselves. It is almost as if we're just like, what you said about at the end of the day, I'm like, what about me? What about me? But it often takes a long time to even get to that point about, oh, what about me?
Yeah.
Like, how did you come to a place of being able to meet your needs, knowing that you were important, that your needs mattered?
Yeah. I want to say, like, some of it, going back to that body psychotherapist that helped me so much, one of the things that I took away from our work together was that it was a non-negotiable, that I have to bring in enough support to ensure that I'm taking care of me.
Yes.
Or that I'm feeling taken care of one way or another. Like whether it was going to therapy and feeling cared for by the therapist, whether that was getting a massage, whether that was getting on my yoga mat, whether, whatever the thing was that would help me not give. And then I was last on that rung. And then of course, talk about relationship, right? Like I felt like I was last, except that my husband felt like he was last,
Yeah.
right? Like he was
And
the
then there's a
bottom rung.
competition between who's had a worse time today.
There was both the competition of who had it worse, but I had like nothing left to give to myself and nothing left to give to him, right? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
our relationship really suffered. And so it was the therapist that said like, this, it's like a drum that has been stretched so tight. The skin of that drum has been stretched and stretched and stretched on this frame. And it feels like it's going to crack. And I was like, yeah, you just described what it feels like. And he was like, so what are you going to do about that? Like, how do we bring more support into the system so that your husband feels taken care of, you feel taken care of, there's more room for the two of you. It's not such a tightly wound system. And honestly, like it was such a practical piece of advice. We needed more childcare. Now, like I get there's financial realities to everything I'm describing. We got creative around it, but what ultimately we needed more support. And with more support, then I was able to literally like you would put in your schedule everything you're doing for everybody else. And I was seeing clients and I was finishing my doctoral program at some point in the midst of all of this. Like there was so much. I literally had to be like yoga, like non-negotiable, surrounded by a big dark box that was like, nothing's going to touch this.
Yeah.
And as I became better and better at ensuring that there was going to be time and space for me to even land for myself, even if all I did was got on my yoga mat and like sat there and cried for 20 minutes, it was better than nothing, right? And so that was a very practical homecoming.
Yeah. And that's so beautiful what you just said, because it sounds like you really, that your lovely body psychotherapist really helped you with that permission piece of, you didn't get kind of tangled up in I'm not worthy or asking for help is weak. There was really something about a willingness to do that. I hope that people listening will kind of grant themselves that permission as well, because often it's the thing of, I've got to still keep control, or I have to tend to the children because I'm the only one who can do it right. And often there has to be a letting go of that other person is maybe not you, but they will be good enough for a couple of hours, and kind of allowing that.
Yeah. Early on, I mean, we're in a different financial reality now, my husband and I, but at the time that we were raising two young kids and, I was in grad school. So like, just think of this financial picture, right? Like two young kids going to daycare.
Yeah, that's expensive.
Like, I believe that was more expensive than both of their college tuitions. Like it was ridiculous, right? And I was in school, so I wasn't bringing an income at the time, and so we were relying on a single income household. So we got really creative. At one point, we ended up renting a room in our house in exchange for childcare, and so someone got housing. We took in a graduate psychology student. It was brilliant, right? Who was studying developmental psych, and they got to be part of, our children's lives. And, but it helped all of us. Like they felt supported. We found the right schedule that worked for us and for our nanny. And I felt supported. And there were times when literally, because we were living together, my nanny, it was like their time to be on with my children. And I was just sitting there having tea while she was watching my children. And like, I still wanted to be around them, but I just needed another co-regulating adult to help me. So we got really creative with things like that at a time when we were like just financially stretched beyond.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because or you often think about there's some like perfect picture, or that grandparents will swoop in. And many of us, especially with complex trauma, we don't actually have that. The parents are either dead, or there's some estrangement, or there's far distance or something. So I really love that you shared that. Thank you. And I'm just conscious of the time. So I want you to tell us, I've loved so much all the richness that you've told us, because we all break down shame by hearing other people's stories. And to hear that you, with all your wonderful books and everything, also struggled with anger and reactivity in motherhood is really helpful. And here to hear how much compassion you have for yourself, that's really kind of such a key thing. So thank you for sharing that with us. Now tell us, how can people connect with you? How can they work with you? What are some of your upcoming programs?
Beautiful. I will answer that question, but I want to say one more thing about what you just shared, because I think that the other key around navigating the anger and navigating what we'll call the ruptures with my kids, because anger inevitably can lead to a rupture, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that I'm grateful that I was also in grad school. Actually, one of my professors when I was parenting my young ones was Ed Tronick, who is I know, right? How lucky. Oh, thank you. Oh
my God.
I know. So I was studying literally all of this as I was parenting them, right? So that was a blessing. And
so like every time you shouted to them, you could run into them, please teach me about how to do that repair again. That's incredible.
So Ed Tronick, for anyone listening who's like not sure why Cath just like got so excited, he's the person that really has done all of this research on parenting and the role of repair around ruptures when they happen. And that ruptures are actually not a bad thing, so long as they are followed by repair. And the rupture repair cycle, when it's a healthy cycle, allows a child to develop their own capacity to really trust in that stress is going to happen and it's going to resolve back into connection. So I feel like because I had that knowledge, it helped us as a family, in a sense, deeply trust that we would always come back together into connection, and that I would, attend to the impact if it was scary, if I lost my temper, but we would always come back around. And I'm such a deep believer. And I will just say, now these two children who are, almost 20 and 22 are thriving, are just they're independent, they're happy, they're living full lives, right? And so it gives me this really broad, big picture perspective that the intensity that we went through back then is temporary. And when it's held not perfect, but wisely enough, it can actually lead in big picture to some strong kids that can handle a really complex world with a lot of empathy and compassion. And I'm so proud of them. And I'm so proud of my husband and I. We did it,
That's well done.
And
well
you'll
done.
be on the other side. I know they're 9, but they'll get there. Yes. So, but how can you get in touch with me? So you can find me at Dr. Arielle Schwartz. If you Google that, if you go to drarielleschwartz.com, I have a second website that's resilience-informed-therapy.com. On Facebook, I'm Dr. Arielle Schwartz. On Instagram, I'm Arielle Schwartz Boulder. And I run lots of retreats. I'm running another retreat back to South Africa in May of 2026.
How magical.
I know, magical. So come, we get to basically heal our nervous systems and go on safari, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
So that's going to be May 2026. We've got an event in Costa Rica and in the Bahamas, and several here in the U.S. And then I have plenty of online programs. Just this week launched the Shift Network Immersion, that is a 6.5-month program that will run in through June of 2026. And we're meeting almost weekly. So if you're joining it and you're joining late, it's okay. You'll get the recordings of the classes you missed, and you can still come in and do the rest of them live. And
what's that one with the Shift one?
That one is with the Shift Network, and it's the Nervous System Restoration and Health program, and it's an immersion practice or immersion program.
And also, if they sign up for your newsletter, they'll also get notification of your nervous system yoga and the beautiful stuff that you've got on YouTube, because you have a lot of beautiful free resources. And then you can also pay to do vagal toning with you, which is really magical. And some of the neck exercises and these sort of and they can follow you on Instagram. But all this will be in the show notes.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining me here today. It was just such an honor and really a delight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.